Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
We'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB. Gulfstream Park's championship meet features great racing now through Florida Derby weekend at the end of March. Good morning. Welcome to Racing Across America on this Saturday morning. I am Seth Merrow. Thanks for joining us. We'll take a look today, a little stakes action on the day, but also going back to last weekend. Eclipse finalists were announced, so a little bit later in the program, Mike MacAdams, the sports writer for the Daily Gazette, but sits right behind me in the press box up at Saratoga all season long, covering horse racing regularly for the Gazette. Get some of his thoughts on the Eclipse finalists and maybe look at our ballots as well. That's coming up a little bit later on. But as I say, we'll look also at some stakes action today. And there's a nice stakes day down at Tampa Bay Downs. Always like to live vicariously up here in upstate New York, watching some of the Florida racing, and Tampa, one of my favorite tracks all year long, really. But certainly in the wintertime, enjoy the Tampa racing. And who better to reach out to than our friend Jason Beem. Jason, good morning.
Good morning. Yeah, today's a good day to be jealous of us. I think it's going to be 80 and sunny today. So.
Yeah, no, it's been too long since I've been. I was thinking of the drive-in today. I'm not sure. I used to be a regular. My father passed away a while ago.
Yeah, I remember that.
Spent the winters down at Bradenton, and I was kind of regular at Tampa. I'd go down and visit him. But it's been, and I was thinking today, I'm not sure I've been there since the road out in front became 4 lanes.
Yeah, well, that's the old road was the county line. So the county line runs through our parking lot, and it's now it's a kind of a little path in the parking lot. But yeah, the new road, Racetrack Road, is in Pinellas County, and the track is in Hillsborough County.
Nice, I like that. And again, fun to watch Tampa. Really enjoy the Tampa racing, and we're about a month and a half, maybe a little more than that, 6 weeks or so into the meet so far. Started late mid-November, and I pulled up last night the stats because it's always interesting to see who's going well on the human side of things as well. Jockey side, Samuel Marin on top, Sammy Camacho, no surprise there. Sonny Leone in third. And I pulled up a picture, and Sammy Marin is on top, so I have Sammy Marin. And usually when I do this, I'll have the top trainer there, too. And the top trainer is Juan Avila. Juan Arriagada second. No surprise, Gerald Bennett third. Kathleen O'Connell fourth. Miguel Clement, interesting, fifth. But I included the picture of Kathleen O'Connell because for folks who aren't watching closely, she's perennially one of the leaders down there. But, boy, she got off to a slow start. Not so much since the first of the year. She has 8 winners going back 8 days, last Friday. So it's worth paying a little bit of attention when Kathleen O'Connell has one entered.
Yeah, she was in the freezer for the first few weeks, and actually it extended before that. Like I think she had a 1 for 87 stretch, which is unheard of. I mean, she's the top female trainer of all time, I believe. And so, and like you said, perennially always down here, but like they were just not firing at all. Her barn was part of the quarantine. We had an equine herpes outbreak here, and since they got the green light to go, she won 4. I think the second day she was back, and then another 2 the other day. Yeah, I mean, like everything she has now is firing. And I don't know if it was the break or what, because obviously they could still train during the quarantine. They just have to train separate. Yeah, everything for her is firing because, like I said, the first few weeks, I mean, they were not running at all.
No, there was comments out on social media. When's Kathleen O'Connell going to win? And then she turned it around.
Yeah, I know. It was. Yeah. I mean, it's funny. It's like maybe it's in the end she's just going to be a 17-18% trainer, and no matter how you get there, you're going to get there.
Yeah, no, but as I say, got to watch anything she has entered. Before we get into the stakes, when I was driving in today, I was thinking. I mean, we've had you on the show going back to, early days in West Coast and whatnot. Give us your year currently. Where do you bounce around to? Again, I'm envious of your winter down in Tampa, but you have a jam-packed year as well. Again, following your Twitter feed, there's travels between tracks during the year and visits to minor league ballparks and whatnot. But what does your year look like now?
Yeah, so home is here. I bought a house here in 2022 in Clearwater, so I live here, but I go to Colonial in the summers, and we moved our schedule up a little bit this year. As it's been the last few years, I've kind of had Tampa, obviously, from November to May, and then usually about a 7 or 8 week break, then Colonial, then about a 7 or 8 week break, and then Tampa. And so, I mean, I have about as good of a schedule as you can ask for. And, also luckily have the podcast with Twin Spires year round, and so that kind of keeps money coming in during those breaks. But Colonial moved up, I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks this year to kind of mid to late June, and so I'll actually go up there. I think June 14th this year is when I'm heading up. So a little bit shorter spring break, but it's good because I was going to go back to Seattle and visit with my mom in the fall. So now I get an extra couple weeks to go spend with her and my family back there. My whole family's out on the West Coast, so this is very far from home.
Yeah, and as I said, in the early days, we had you on for some West Coast conversation and whatnot. But
Portland Meadows.
Yeah, as you say, a nice schedule for you now. And again, I'm envious down there at Tampa. And again, it's one of those tracks. I tell people if you haven't visited yet, put it on your list. Oak Lawn is a lot of fun. I haven't been there in a while, but similar to me in that both of the tracks they have a good clientele, and you get a good buzz in the building, and that's always a lot of fun. And Tampa is just a perfect sized facility where you get in there and just a weekday, a nice little crowd. There's a nice little buzz in the building.
Yeah, Fridays are usually the quietest day on track, and there's still atmosphere. There's never a sunny day where the rail's not pretty much full, as far as where the grandstand is. And like you said, I think being a little bit of a smaller building, I think helps with the atmosphere. There's been times I've gone to bigger tracks where it feels empty, even though there's 3,000 people there. Yeah. And to me, that is just not, it just doesn't quite create the atmosphere. The thing is, though, I've never experienced a race at Tampa as a fan, so I don't know what it's like out here. I've only ever been upstairs, and the way the roof overhangs, I only see the front row of the rail. Everything else is just auditory. And big days, the sound definitely comes up, which is a lot of fun because obviously the adrenaline gets going. Like I usually open the window when it's nice, just to kind of hear the crowd and feel them a little bit.
I can vouch for, as a fan, it is a lot of fun, and I got to get back down there certainly. Oh, and today I believe we will hear your dulcet tones on the Fox show, right?
I don't know.
I think that
possibly. Maggie. That's right, because Maggie's coming down.
Yeah. I was watching the pregame from Naira yesterday, and they were saying they have some Tampa in the mix. I think over the weekend. So
because Oaklawn takes that break now. Yeah. So as a general rule, the last few years, when Oaklawn is canceled for various snow or ice or whatever, we usually are we're the sixth man of the year award winner.
Very good. And experiences, I always tell this story when I talk about Tampa, experiencing as a fan, I'm pretty sure it was Tampa Bay Derby Day, and this is going back a ways. I'm standing on the ground floor of the grandstand watching one of the races on a TV, and I realized standing right in front of me, Davy Jones from the Monkees, who I believe at the time had a farm in Ocala. So, yeah, you can have a little extra fun maybe with some...
Daydream believer.
Yeah. There you go. All right, let's jump in and take a look at the two stakes today at Tampa. We'll kick things off with the Gasparilla. Field of 6 in here. I pulled up a replay. Both stakes look like they have horses that may wind up being tough to beat. We'll see if you have other opinions. But Tessellate, if I'm pronouncing that correct, comes out of a win in a stake over at Gulfstream. We're going to look at that. It was a pretty dominating win, 13 lengths on the chart. That was win number 2 and start number 4, but has been on the board the other 2 starts. But off of this win, it's going to be tough to get past the Saffie Joseph horse. That said, Latescape, a debut winner for Tommy Proctor. There's still maybe some blue sky for that one. And the aforementioned Kathleen O'Connell has Gerard's Cross. And again, leave her out of your mix at your peril over the last week or so. How did you see the Gasparilla?
Yeah, I thought Tessellate, had a perfect trip, and Lightscape, I thought didn't. So I'm inclined to move that one up a little bit. Tessellate, the race, the other two favorites, there was kind of 3 top choices right around 8-5, 2-1. The other 2 went out and dueled right in front of her, and she got kind of the catbird seat to watch that. But I think that kind of exaggerated the margin a little bit because the 2 best horses in the race both drilled each other into submission. And so the horses that were chasing her were the longer shots on the board. And so it was no doubt the best effort of any of these horses in the race. But I did think things kind of went her way in that spot. Lightscape broke terrible in that debut. And if you watch, oddly enough, the horses that this almost makes me downgrade the Trouble a little bit because the two horses that ended up running 1-2, Permian Basin and Light Skin, were the two that had bad starts. So, was it a bit of a suspect field? Possibly. Permian Basin came back and won the other day when we had that pick 5 carryover and was a 7-1 winner. So I guess that validates Lightscape's race a little bit. So I thought those two were interesting. I didn't love the Lady Valor or the Ridgey race. They're coming out of a common race. Lady Valor, kind of got had to wait a little on the turn, but I just didn't. It wasn't like I would call it trouble, and so I downgraded them a little bit. So I do think it's between the top two in the morning line for sure.
Yeah, it's again Tessa late looking tough, but as you say, maybe off the trip, folks can go in another drive. I think if you get past that one, you get, and this does kick off a late pick 5, by the way. And if you get past that price, anytime in a pick 5, you get one price in a pick 5, you usually wind up with a decent payoff. All right, let's take a look now at the Wayward Last. That's going to be race 7 this afternoon. Fillies and Mares going 8.5 furlongs. Again, I think Drexel Hill is going to take an awful lot of action. I pulled up the Mother Goose going back to November at Aqueduct. Fully subscribed. The number 6 will be the winner, but getting up, edging the third place finisher, going to be number 9 Drexel Hill, and off of that second place finish shows up this afternoon at Tampa. I will say the winner, fully subscribed, came back to win the Comley in the next start for Chad and Klarovich, so running second to that one. I think is, flatters the horse, was flattered subsequently with the follow-up win by Fully Subscribed. That said, Andrea's interesting to me. Runaway Diva, I think, is a little bit intriguing as well if people are looking for alternatives. But how did you see the Wayward Lass?
Yeah, I'm on Andrea. I believe it's Andrea. I think somebody told me it was named after the bartender at Gulfstream. So that was a Pete Aiella insight for me. But I'm gonna actually call him and double check that. But I believe it's Andrea. But anyways, yeah, I thought first of all she should be on the lead clearly, and that's never the worst thing on dirt track, and that's certainly the case here at Tampa. These horses that come out of the Kentucky Oaks, and obviously there's a couple of them because early on ran in that race and has been off since then. Oaks and Derby Trail horses, they just get bet so much for a long time, like the name recognition. Obviously, like running second in the Oaks is really good too. So I don't know. I always try to beat these kind of horses. I think they just get overbet for a lot of reasons, and I thought Andrea might be able to be clear early. And if she turns for home in front, then we'll take our chances at maybe a bit of a price.
Yeah, I will say the Mahoning Valley race, I'm just drawing a line through.
Yeah, you got dueled the 6 furlongs, but this is a way different race, right? Yeah. And this horse hasn't run long very often, but I go back to the Hallandale Beach at Gulfstream, I guess it would have been the fall before last, when kind of able to get loose. Like a lot of this horse's races, she's not necessarily loose. She's up there battling, and so that's kind of my hope here is that into that first turn, she's able to kind of get cozy. Very
good. And I'm glad you mentioned the podcast. I was going to bring that up as well. You do have – how often is the podcast?
4 days a week. We do Monday through Thursday, and next week is our 10th anniversary.
Is that right?
Wow. We're coming up on 2,500 episodes, which is nuts. Starting with Bet America, and then Churchill Twin Spires acquired us, so to speak, when they bought Bet America.
Oh, and if folks follow your Twitter feed, they can get linked to that normally. And you have on. I will tout it. It's a good podcast. You have on good guests, and it's always good conversation. And I have to ask one other thing: are you still painting?
Yeah, yeah. That's become like my new favorite hobby. I didn't bring my stuff when I went up to Colonial. I realized I was like, oh, this is like something I missed a lot. So it's nice to be home here. And
am I right?
Am
I right that the sip and paint was kind of your introduction?
Yeah. I had a first date. I had a first date a couple of years ago. We went to paint and sip, and I didn't have a second date, but I had a second time painting. So it's a great hobby, and I always thought art was something you had or didn't have. I thought it was pure like genetics and all that. And once I figured out it was something you can learn, I got real excited about it. And it's a great pastime. And at the end, you have something tangible.
Well, you've kind of inspired me because like you, I'm the same way. Currently, if I try to draw a human face, it winds up to be a cartoon. But I looked at some, and I will tip my cap to you. You tweeted it out at one point. You did a capital OTB branch at one point.
Yeah.
We all appreciated that here, certainly. So, Jason, always enjoy the conversation. As they say, we'll be tuned in and watching and living vicariously with the good weather down in Tampa today and throughout the meet, and we'll talk again.
All right, guys. Have a good day.
Appreciate it. Jason Beem again.
Bye.
Nice card today down at Tampa, highlighted by a couple of stakes as well. That'll be right here. You can enjoy it also this afternoon. All right, we will take a break. And well, actually, before we take a break, because I had Mike scheduled for 10:20. So I did have a couple of news and notes items that I could hit on before that, if I have them here in my mix, and I think I have them. Where did I? What did I do with those? So maybe we will take a break, and then I'll hit on the. Oh no, here we go. Because again, the Eclipse Awards are coming up in a couple of weeks, and finalists were announced on Sunday. But that always gets tied in this time of year. The Fan Moment of the Year is open. The NTRA opened up the Fan Moment of the Year. You can go to the NTRA website, and I believe that you'll find a link probably there on the front page. And you, as a fan, can pick your moment of the year until midnight on January 15th. I thought the selections this year were, I don't know, a little, I'm not sure. Some of the sovereignty moments I think are okay, but we'll see where the betting public goes, where the voting public goes. But the fan moment of the year choices this year, Godolphin winning the Kentucky Oaks. Okay, Sovereignty winning the Derby, that seems legit. Journalism in the Preakness, Sovereignty winning the Belmont. D. Wayne Lucas passing away on June 28th. That to me, I don't know if that, I certainly think it is worth honoring the career of D. Wayne Lucas, but I'm not sure you want to make the moment of the year his passing necessarily. Journalism winning the Haskell. Sovereignty winning the Travers. As a homer, that's probably the direction I'd go. Fierceness wins the Pacific Classic. Ted Noffey completes an undefeated season in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Forever Young wins the Breeders' Cup Classic. And Flavian Prat winning 7 on a card closing day, Belmont, which again, that was phenomenal because it was the day after the Breeders' Cup. So he hopped on a flight. As the story goes, he got in like 3 o'clock in the morning, got a couple hours sleep, goes over to Belmont at the Big A and wins 7. So as reading them out loud now, there are some notables in here that I could pull the trigger for. I thought the Wayne Lucas one was a little funny. Again, not that he doesn't deserve and has gotten the accolades for an incredible career. I just thought passing as a moment of the year was a little bit of a funny choice maybe. But there are some notables on here, certainly. And it will be interesting to see where the fans go. And again, you can go to the NTRA website and cast your vote. It says 1 vote per X account. So maybe they will send you to Twitter to make I didn't open up the page. I'll have to go and check that out and see. But again, you have until midnight on January 15th if you would like to cast your vote for the moment of the year. All right, we'll take a break. When we come back, Mike MacAdams from the Daily Gazette will take a look at this year's Eclipse finalists. Again, a couple of weeks, they will be announced. The finalists came out a week ago tomorrow. Last Sunday, the finalists were announced. So we'll kind of take a look at the finalists and maybe give some ideas how our ballots look. All of that right after this. Stay tuned.
The championship season is on at Gulfstream Park with great horse racing action Thursday through Sunday. Come out and enjoy the world's best horses, trainers, and jockeys as they compete over the Hallandale Beach Oval all season long. Take your experience up a notch and join us in 10 Palms Restaurant with unbeatable track views, outstanding dining, and convenient wagering options. For reservations, event schedules, tickets, and more, head to GulfstreamPark.com.
Think horse racing is too complicated? Think again.
And they're off!
Every pro was a newbie once. Meet DRF Newbie, the mobile tool loaded with daily racing form data and the power of DRF AI.
What a shocker!
Get the insights you need fast so you can play smarter and feel more confident. DRF Newbie, horse racing made simple. Try it free today. Visit newbie.drf.com.
Want to get your career in horse racing off to a fast start? Well, the University of Arizona's Racetrack Industry Program is your winning ticket. The Racetrack Industry Program has served as a springboard to some of the industry's most successful individuals, with a proven track record of job placement right out of college. If you want to earn a degree in the exciting horse racing industry, the Racetrack Industry Program can put you in the winner's circle.
Welcome back. As promised, friend Mike MacAdams, sports writer for the Daily Gazette, as I said at the top, the horse racing writer as well, as he sits behind me most days up in the press box at Saratoga. Great coverage throughout the meet up there, but I thought we would take a look at the finalists for the Eclipse Awards with Mike, as he's a voter, and I am too, maybe hit on our ballots as well. Mike, good morning.
Morning, Seth. Thanks for having me on. How are you today?
Very good. Happy to have you on. Should we get the obligatory plug out of the way?
Let's do that. Why don't we? Because I don't want to forget. It happened one time. You want to do it, or do you want me to do it?
Well, I was gonna kind of lead into it. I will set it up, and then you can jump in, because I ran into the owner at the supermarket the other day.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Did they scold you for not showing your face in there? Desperate Annie's, of course, you're talking about in downtown Saratoga Springs.
And I will say, I haven't been there in probably since the meet. I was probably
I haven't either.
Closing night, which is our tradition.
Right.
So
it's my last time. It sounds like we need to make a New Year's resolution or something.
Yeah, there you go. We'll have to fix that problem. No question about it.
Most people are, their resolutions is I'm going to exercise more and lose weight. Ours is to go sit on a dark bar stool at Desperate Annie's. So hey, everybody's got their dreams.
I like that. All right, Eclipse Awards and finalists, and like me, you've probably seen some of the ballots out on Twitter, and as most years, there were certainly some slam dunks. We'll hit on those. There were some categories that were a little more up in the air. We'll hit on those as well. But my general takeaway from looking at other people's ballots, even the categories that were a little bit up in the air, it was really up in the air amongst 3 or 4. The ballots that people put out there pretty much coincided with what I had. And again, it came down to maybe some categories where it was tough to come up with the top one. But I don't think there were any real shockers on the finalist list, certainly.
No, and I went through this morning and I compared the finalists to who I picked, and I was pretty much in line. I mean, most of the ones I was different were like the third choice, which is kind of insignificant anyway. I mean, when it boils down to who actually wins each of these categories, they're only counting first place votes, and the second and third choices aren't really factoring into it at all. It's just a means of establishing the 3 finalists in each category. So, I think that was pretty consistent with, how the finalist list came up, with at least one notable exception that we'll get to, that I'm kind of dreading, because I was doing my research again this morning, kind of going over it, and I was like, how did you pick this on top instead of this other person on top? You can tell it's in the human category, as I just, clued you guys in on. But, I mean, the top picks, most of my picks are kind of consistent with, how the finalist list. And again, it's like you're splitting hairs on like that third place. I tell you, I've been doing this for, I don't know, maybe 15 years now, the Eclipse Awards, and I agonize over that third pick a lot of the time, more than I do over the top pick. Which I guess is the way it should be. That's the way you want it ideally, because you want somebody to kind of be a clear-cut, winner in each category. It's fun to have debates and stuff, and it's fun to, go back and forth when it is a tight race. But I'm telling you that I should clock it sometime and see how much time did you spend on the second and third as opposed to the first place, and it might be an interesting revealing number.
And I'm glad you brought up the voting. I mentioned it when I talked about this the other day, but for folks who aren't familiar, the top vote, the top choice, that is all that is considered for the actual eclipse. And
Correct.
Then the second and third, and it's a 10-5-1 point system. Second and third decide the finalists. And I think the game plan there is just to avoid, a consensus pick, a unanimous pick. You wouldn't have 3 finalists. So they have this system that guarantees we'll get 3 finalists every year. despite a category that has an outstanding candidate. And I think one of those is this year's 2-year-old male. That, to me, this was a slam dunk. I have a replay here of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, Ted Noffey. You can see on the screen Brant Gastad and Ted Noffey. I would find it hard to believe virtually everyone didn't put Ted Noffey on top. And for me, I had it Ted Noffey, Brant, and I put Napoleon Solo on out of the Champagne win. And again, those third-place finishes, your third-place votes, you're just looking to maybe honor a horse or a person if they can get into the finalist category. But again, it looks like Ted Noffey's a slam dunk.
Yeah, well, we'll get to the 3-year-old filly. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but I thought Nitrogen was a slam dunk, but Ted Noffey and 2-year-old male, that was a slam dunk to win the NBA slam dunk championship by shattering the backboard. It was just that easy. 4 for 4. You look at the races he won, Grade 1 hopeful, and then he wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I mean, that's the definition of a slam dunk in any category.
Yeah, no question. 2-year-old fillies, that was maybe a little more wide open. The final 3, Cy-Fair, Explorer, and Super Correador. But, again, I think it's going to be Super Correador fairly easily, I would have to think, in this category, coming out of the win.
I agree with that. And like the 2-year-old divisions, you don't have as big a body of evidence a lot of the times. So, and I generally try not to, if a horse won the Breeders' Cup in their division and that was the only race they won all year, I tend to lean against that a little bit, or at least try to find something else. And, in the 2-year-old divisions, there are, they don't race as much, so there's not as much evidence to go by and as big of a solid of a resume. In this case, I was willing to forego that, and so I had Super Corridor on top and Explorer, and then I had Mythical in the 3rd spot instead of Cy-Fair, who was the finalist. 5 for 6, 4 stakes wins, including the Grade 3 Adirondack for Mythical. But again, you're kind of splitting hairs when you get down to that level.
Yeah, I had Cy-Fair as one of my finalists because she beat the boys in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile.
Sprint.
Yeah, but it was a turf sprint. So I mean, you can kind of parse that out a little bit.
That was a little bit behind my Mythical leaning also.
Yeah, no, I have no argument with that direction. 3-year-old male, the finalists, no surprise. They were kind of the top 3-year-olds throughout the Triple Crown season and beyond. Sovereignty, Journalism, and Baeza. But again, it's going to be, I would think, almost unanimous that Sovereignty will pull down the award with the season he had. Now, doesn't make it to the Breeders' Cup, but still, you are looking at a very solid 5 for 6. Travers, Belmont, Kentucky Derby amongst the Grade 1s. So I think Sovereignty, as I say, will be another one of the fairly easy winners on the afternoon.
Yeah, and the only way he wouldn't have is if Journalism or Baeza jumped up and won the Breeders' Cup Classic, and they didn't. So end of story as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, totally agree. 3-year-old filly, you mentioned earlier, and I'm right with you, Nitrogen on top. The final 3, Good Cheer, Nitrogen, and She's So Spicy. But for me, Nitrogen was fairly easy as well with the win in the Alabama. Nice Grade 1 win. Close-up second against Older in the Spinster. Good second against Older in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. But again, winning the stakes on turf and dirt, including that Grade 1 Alabama, I tilted towards Nitrogen as well.
That was an easy pick for me. I already called it a slam dunk. I mean, the season she had was so fascinating. 6-3, never finished worse than second in 9 starts as a 3-year-old filly. So I went Nitrogen, Fionn, and Good Cheer. And Fionn was based largely because she also had a very good season, 6-0-1 from 8 starts, and she actually beat Nitrogen in the Belmont Oaks Grade 1 over She's So Spicy. She's So Spicy had a really great season, but I just thought Fionn, had just a little bit more, solidity behind her season this year. But again, Nitrogen is one of the most fascinating seasons to follow this year. With Mark Caffey deciding, after she She ran that Wonder Again, was supposed to be on the turf at Saratoga, rained off, scratched down the 3 horses. She wins by 17 lengths. And he started almost talking about the Alabama shortly after that, even though he was still kind of planning to go to the Belmont Oaks and keep her on the turf. And he stuck to it. And, I mean, just the season, what she accomplished by itself was just really strong. But then, the shift in midstream from turf to dirt and, not losing her stride at all was kind of really interesting. One of the great stories of the whole season, I thought.
I totally agree. That Wonder Again up there, Belmont Stakes weekend in June, sloppy track. That he elects to stay in was interesting. And
right.
Win by 17 lengths. And as you say, they come out of that, he's like, maybe the Alabama might be in her future. And it's a bona fide, at that point, a bona fide stakes winner on the turf. So the whole thing was interesting there. I tossed She's So Spicy in my mix as a finalist with the win, again, against the boys in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. But she was a turf sprinter, but I thought she had a very good season. And again, beating the boys in a grade 1. So gets a grade 1, goes outside her sex. That to me was added. But as I say, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But I do think Nitrogen probably, for most people, does get the edge.
And then Good Cheer being in 3rd place. I mean, what a start to the season. It's a tale of 2 halves of seasons for her. Kentucky Oaks, 3 graded stakes wins to begin the season. And then there's a clear line of demarcation between the first half of her season, and then she didn't do anything in the second half. So she was in great position, but just never, kind of finished it out.
Yeah, you win the Kentucky Oaks, and at that point, you're clearly the leader leading into the second half of the year. And the second half of the year, it just didn't hold up for her. I mean, winds up running 5th in the Cotillion, and that was the last race on the resume. So, but again, with the Kentucky Oaks on the resume, you certainly have to respect that a little bit. All right, older.
Well, you're the leader in the clubhouse, sort of, and then, but you still need to not have other horses, jump up. And actually, it's a bad analogy because you're not in the clubhouse; you're still out there. But you're definitely the one to beat at that point.
Yeah, and that's the way it is, and as it should be every year. You can have that great first half of the year and be a strong contender, but the horses that then pick up the later half of the year have a chance to surpass you, and I think that is how it played out for.
There's still a lot of racing out there.
Yeah, older male. This, to me, is the most interesting category to see how it'll wind up when, the votes are all cast. Forever Young, Nice.
It was subject to probably more debate on social media than any other category, too.
And I think I'm up against it. I wound up going with Nisos. I debated about Mind Frame. Sierra Leone with the 1 victory. To me, it's just tough to pull the trigger. Sierra Leone had a great season, but again, it was only 1 win, and you're looking at the whole season, and that has to count for something. Nisos, gets a grade 1 win in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, finishes up the year the day after, well, it was supposed to be the day after Christmas, a couple of days after Christmas, with a win in the Pinkai, goes 4 for 5. I tilted there. Mind Frame had a pretty good career with the win in the Stephen Foster, the win in the Grade 1 Churchill Downs as well, but at the end of the year, now part of that you have to draw the line through the Jockey Club, so I could have pulled the trigger there. You can make a case for each of the finalists and maybe 1 or 2 others, but as I say, this one to me is going to be interesting. And again, I went Nisos, Mind Frame, Sierra Leone for my final 3.
I went against what I had already spoken to about not picking a horse whose only race was in the Breeders' Cup and they won it. And I went Forever Young, which was borne out in how the finalists played out. I also had Fierceness, and Nisos had just an absolutely spectacular season. And, Fierceness, he needed 1 more. But, in this case, all the hype leading up into the Breeders' Cup Classic was how this was one of the greatest fields we've seen in 10 years or however, whatever number you want to put on it. Granted, Sovereignty scratches out, but, we would have loved to have seen him in there. And I like Forever Young in that race, even with Sovereignty in there. And then it's 7-2 morning line. And then I think it was 5-2 when it was adjusted. But But I went Forever Young, despite the fact that that was his only North American start, because he beat this supposedly phenomenal field in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So with everybody else sort of canceling each other out in certain ways, like, Mind Frame season fizzled out. Would have loved to have seen what he could have done. Sierra Leone, as you already mentioned, only had one win, 5 times graded stakes place, but, I couldn't throw Sierra Leone in there just off of a Whitney win, as prestigious as that race was. So with everybody else sort of canceling each other out, and Forever Young, in commanding fashion, winning the Breeders' Cup Classic against this ridiculous field. In this case, I was willing to kind of throw out my general rule of thumb about not picking a horse who, he only had one start in North America. And, I did it without any reservation, I have to say. But again, back to Nysos, what a great season he had.
And I'm with you with that rule, and I couldn't quite go by it. And it's not a steadfast rule. There might be certain years where I'd go, but yeah, the one start in North America. To me, the Eclipse Awards reward North American horses, and these foreign horses have their own awards. And in fact, it was about a week ago or so, Forever Young was named the Japanese horse of the year. And what's interesting there is he only had one start in Japan this year. So, and from what I read, they typically give it to a turf horse. So being a dirt horse, he kind of overcame that. But it was also, he started the year winning the Saudi Cup, then third in the Dubai World Cup. That was back in April. Then laid off until that little race in Japan that I think was just meant to set him up for the Breeders' Cup. And he won that, and went over and won the Breeders' Cup. But yeah, he got his trophy already, and he may get another one. Again, there may be plenty of voters like you, and I don't have any real argument against it. But I'd like to see at least a couple of starts in North America before I pull the trigger.
What it boiled down to me was he was the best horse in that division, and you can make that argument, or you can shoot down that argument by saying, again, going back to the one race in North America, I get that, but and it's something that I kind of adhere to this certain degree. But this case, I looked at this a lot, and I looked at it a long time, and finally, sometimes the easiest answer is the easiest answer. He's the best horse, and he beat this crazy field in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So what are you waiting for?
Yeah, you do make a great point about the field, certainly. And so, as I say, I don't have a real argument against. I just that is one of my kind of unofficial rules. All right, let's move on to the older female category. The finalists in the older female category: Scylla, Splendora, Torpedo Anna. They look at the Breeders' Cup as the championship event, so to speak, and Scylla did win it, but it was her only win of the year, so I couldn't really pull the trigger there. Torpedo Anna doesn't make the Breeders' Cup, but otherwise, it was a pretty solid season for her. Ran fourth in the Spinster, and Kenny McPeak decided to, send her to the sidelines after that and wind up the career. But it was a pretty good season.
And rightfully so.
Yeah,
right.
But it was a pretty good career, certainly. Wins the Grade 1 Apple Blossom, wins the, and we're going to take a look here at the stretch run in Saratoga, the Grade 1 Personal Ensign, amongst 4 of 6 victories on the season. And
great race.
Yeah, you look at the rest of them in here. I think at the end of the season, with those couple of Grade 1s, including this nice effort up at Saratoga in the Personal Ensign, she winds up, she was on top for me. I went Torpedo Anna, Splendora, Scylla, and I tend to think she's probably in a pretty good spot when they announce the winners as well.
I think so too, and you hate to put like sentimental value or you don't want that component to enter into it, but I think we're human beings. I think some people, all things being equal between Torpedo Anna and Scylla, they're just going to pull the trigger on Torpedo Anna, which I did, but more on her resume than anything else. A 4-time graded stakes winner. You already mentioned the Apple Blossom and the Personal Ensign. I just think her overall resume was, all things being equal, was more solid than Scylla's overall. And then I had Cavallari in the third spot, 3 for 3 on the season, won the Grade 1 Beholder. So I kind of went in a little different direction there from Splendor.
And again, Scylla was just tough for the Breeders' Cup distaff. It was a great race, and she gets a 103 by on the solid. But you look at the rest of the resume on the season, tough to pull the trigger on her as compared to what Torpedo Anna did. And Kenny McPeak, you may be right. There may be some sentimental, and deservedly so, because Kenny McPeak treated her the way she should be treated to get what we all talk about all the time, a fan favorite. Last year as a 3-year-old, 2 years ago as a 3-year-old up at Saratoga, he was announcing, she's going to be on the track with the workout, we're going to be in the paddock, and he really built up that fandom for Torpedo Anna, and so that may play into it, but justifiably so to some extent.
I wasn't there, but her last day at the Oklahoma, which was in late October or whatever it was, middle of October, he invited people to give her, final farewell. Or like a couple hundred people showed up to bring her treats and stuff. Her resume didn't include just her racing. It including kind of what she did for the sport, just being, so accessible through Kenny McPeak. Hats off to him for just the last 2 seasons, how he's made her accessible to the fans. Who knows how many people are bigger fans of the sport now from just having shown up there and being welcomed and saying, yeah, she's right over there, go take a picture.
Yeah, and then he did it right at the end, too. She retired towards the end of the Keeneland meet and closing day at Keeneland. He walked her in the paddock, and the next day, opening day at Churchill, he walked her in the paddock there as well, and so kept it going right through the last few days as well. So we'll see how that plays out, but as I say, she seems like a pretty logical one as well in a couple of weeks. All right, male sprinters. This category is tough. The finalists for male sprinter, Ben Tornado, Bookham Dano, and Nysos. I think it's down to Ben Tornado and Bookham Dano, certainly. I went with Bookham Dano. I just could not ignore, Saratoga extended, certainly, with the addition of that Belmont Stakes weekend. But he's 3 for 3 with sprint stakes at Saratoga in a season. That's very notable, winding up with the Grade 1 Forgo victory. They bypassed the Breeders' Cup, and so that counts. And Ben Tornado, spectacular in the Breeders' Cup, but that was one of only 2 starts on the season. I tilted towards Bookham Dano over Ben Tornado. And then in the third spot, I had Raging Torrent, actually. But I'm going to be very intrigued to see how it plays out when the envelope's opened.
Yeah, I went Bookham Dano over Ben Tornado also, just for the overall body of work. Ran, 5 times, ran, won 3 graded stakes, including Grade 1 Forgo at Saratoga. You already mentioned Ben Tornado only ran once, and his other start was ungraded stakes that he won by 5 1/4. So I didn't really have that long of a debate over this one between those two. And the third place spot, as I already mentioned, the spectacular season Nysos had, but I didn't pick him in the third spot. I picked Booth, who won 4 straight. Okay, he's running he's basically a Grade 3 horse. He ran, he won 4 straight races, but he was a true sprinter. All his races are 6 furlongs, and you throw in you mentioned the Lafitte Pink Eye that Nysos won recently, but that's 1 mile and a 16th. He won the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, but that's 2 turns at Del Mar. So I just didn't think Nysos was a sprinter, plain and simple.
Yeah,
and that's why I didn't use him. And again, nothing against his season, which is, Horse of the Year finalist, worthy. But I just thought it was like putting a round peg in a square hole, or whatever the analogy is. And so I thought that kind of disqualified him in my mind. So I went for the one that appeared to be, a true sprinter, which was Booth. And he did win 3 Grade 3 races for the third spot.
I'm right with you. That to me doesn't look like a sprinter campaign. That said, I went with Raging Torn in the third spot with 2 mile runs. So maybe I went against it there, but overall.
Well, he beat Fierceness in the Met Mile. Yeah. But again, and that's out of the Wilson Chute. So it's 1.5 turns.
Yeah, it was hybrid. So, but as I say, I'm going to be interested. I think Bookham Dano, and looking at some of the ballots online, maybe has an edge in there, but I'm going to be interested to see how that one plays out for sure. Philly Sprint Division, the finalist Copian, She's So Spicy, and Splendora. I went with She's So Spicy. I mentioned this one before, having a nice 5-4-7 season, but wound it up winning a Grade 1 Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint against the boys. You know, a 3-year-old sprinter, a 3-year-old filly turf sprinter facing the boys and getting it done in that Grade 1. I tilted in her direction. Again, I'm She's So Spicy, Splendora, and Hope Road on my ballot. How did you go in the filly sprint?
I went Splendora on top, and again, I admire the season that She's So Spicy had. So I had her in the second spot. Third spot, I had Queen Maxima. I know the finalist was Copion. But I just thought Splendora, like, I don't want to use recency bias, but her second half of the season, she won an allowance, and she won an ungraded stakes, and then she won the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint by 4 3/4 lengths over Vava, a very good sprinter, and then Hope Road was in third after its ballerina winner. So it was a little tight for me in this one because I do admire She's So Spicy season, but I just thought the Breeders' Cup win was that impressive, but she had other stuff to kind of bolster her resume. She wasn't like a one-hit wonder in the Breeders' Cup, so I went Splendora on top.
Yeah, and I don't have any big argument with that. This is one of the categories, though, that I think is a little bit up in the air. It's going to be, again, fun to see what happens when Copion started the season with a lot of promise and then didn't quite fulfill that. But I'll be interested to see.
I was kind of consistently voting her in like the 9 or 10 spot in the NTRA poll way back when. But then he didn't really follow up on it enough.
And you are a voter in the NTRA poll, bringing that up. I pulled that up yesterday. I was interested to see how the season started with the 3-year-olds, and then I realized the poll doesn't start till March, right?
Right, something like that. We need to get a little bit of body of evidence to assemble before.
Yeah, which makes sense.
That first week is the hardest week of all of them because, first of all, the research you have to do just to figure out who's still running. Because, a lot of times there's no retirement story out there for some of these horses, and you got to, like, really dig around and figure out who's running, and then also, who's going to be any good this year that you think. So that first poll is a bear.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I say, I went to look up, I wonder where the voters are with 3-year-olds right here as we start the year. And then I realized
they're in the ether still.
Yeah, I got to wait a little bit. All right, let's go to male turf. The 3 finalists they all had very good seasons. Deterministic, Notable Speech, Rebels Romance. For me, I went Notable Speech over Rebels Romance, over Deterministic. We were up at Woodbine covering the Woodbine Mile. Notable Speech gets the victory up there. Talked to Charlie Appleby's assistant after it. He said, well, we're going back to England. We'll train up, come back for the Breeders' Cup Mile. They did, and they won. I think we do have a replay of the Breeders' Cup Mile here. Notable Speech getting it done. A couple of North American Grade 1s. I tilted in that direction. But again, I think all 3 of these finalists had very good seasons.
Yeah, I went Notable Speech, Deterministic, and Rebels Romance. You already mentioned the Woodbine Mile and followed it up in the Breeders' Cup Mile. Only 2 starts in North America, but he crushed it in 2, Grade 1. Yeah. So I thought it was pretty easy for me putting him on top. And then the other 2 were very logical as well.
Yeah, as I say, I would have no argument with any of those. But with the 2 wins, the 2 pretty convincing wins in Grade 1s in North America, I tilted in the direction of Notable Speech. Female turf horse, the finalists are Gazora, She Feels Pretty, and She's So Spicy. I had it She Feels Pretty over Lush Lips, over She's So Spicy. And I think, She Feels Pretty with 3 wins and a couple of seconds in 5 starts. That included a win up at Woodbine in the Grade 1 EP Taylor. I tilted in her direction. And amongst these, it'll be interesting to see, I suppose, because Gazora comes over and wins the Filly and Mare Turf. But again, for me, tough to pull the trigger on top for a horse with the only the 1 North American start. But it'll be interesting to see how the voters go in here. But I think the Cherie DeVoe runner probably has a little bit of an edge.
Gazora, it was an easy cross for me based on what you just mentioned. I had She Feels Pretty on top, Beyond in the second place, and Lush Lips in the third place. She Feels Pretty I don't know how much weight you should put on the losses, but if you look at two of her losses, it was by a head in the Grade 1 Diana and by half a length in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Turf. So, I mean, she had a really solid season with, the two Grade 1s that you already mentioned, the New York and the EP Taylor. So, she was a pretty easy pick for me on top. And then, as I mentioned, Gazora was an easy toss. I didn't even use her in my 3.
And finally, in the horse category, steeplechasing, just hit on that quickly because normally there's somebody stands out. Nobody stood out this year, and so I just tilted towards Cool Jet. I have a Cool Jet proven innocent and swore, but this was a category that was a total head scratcher. I did vote, however. I do not abstain because I like the steeplechase. I handicap them all up at Saratoga, and I vote in there, but I put Cool Jet on top on the steeplechase side.
I think by default, you and I have to vote on the steeplechase just because we got Grade 1s right in front of us a couple times every year. We have no choice. I'd be curious to see which category gets more abstentions, this one or apprentice jockey, just from a number standpoint. And again, like I mentioned with the 2-year-olds, there's not a lot of body of evidence out there. But even worse in this case, like a lot of people don't follow this segment of the sport, so they don't know what's important, what's valuable. So I had Cool Jet, Swore, and Proven Innocent in the 3rd place. And I thought Cool Jet was actually a pretty easy pick for me. 2-time Grade 3 winner, and he was first in the Grade 1 Commonwealth. I mean, that's a lot of stuff for a steeplechase, where they only run like maybe 4 times a year.
Yeah, I mean, in previous years, a horse like Snap Decision was kind of maybe a standout. This year, as an 11-year-old, the season didn't quite pan out. And Jimmy P, with the win in the Jonathan Shepard, was a little bit interesting, but other than that, not much. So it was kind of a little bit of a tough category this year. Cool Jet, again, probably had enough of a career to get it, though. All right, let's go on the human side of things, and unless you have something notable in here, we can quickly hit on owner and breeder. Because to me, those categories.
Not really. I got usual suspects.
Yeah, I'm the same. And you're just kind of looking at numbers, totals and numbers, and that's the way you go. I will say, owner side, I'm Godolphin, Klarovich, and Spendthrift. You can see the finalists up there. And then in breeder, I'm Godolphin, Don Alberto, and Judy Hicks. And I mentioned it earlier. Underneath, I try to put horses or people who maybe you would like to see get honored a little bit. And Judy Hicks, the small breeder, but bred Torpedo Anna, and so she has to me an Eclipse winner, at least on my ballot. So I tossed her in there. But again, you're just kind of looking at total wins and graded stakes wins, and it's just kind of a numbers game with those 2 categories.
Yeah, I mean, Godolphin dominates this for obvious reasons. They had 5 different Grade 1 winners, including Sovereignty this year, which means they also had 5 Grade 1 winners as a breeder because they run all their own stuff. So, I mean, I went Godolphin, Windstar, Spendthrift in the breeders' side of it. Don Alberto showing up in the finalist for breeders makes sense because he was journalism, and Clico won the cotillion. I thought Spendthrift was kind of a no-brainer just because you got Tommy Joe and Ted Noffey, winning Grade 1 2-year-old stakes on back-to-back days at Saratoga and the rest of the stuff that they did this season. But yeah, these 2 categories, it seems like each passing year, it's just sort of the usual suspects.
Yeah, because the big outfits just by sheer numbers seem to have an advantage. And again, as you kind of indicated, they have prominent horses and prominent stakes winners, so makes sense. But a little more.
A lot of resources.
Yeah, exactly. A little more interesting, though, trainer jockey, apprentice jockey, trainer, the finalists, Chad Brown, Brad Cox, Bill Mott. Those are the finalists. My ballot was Chad Brown, Brad Cox, Todd Pletcher. I understand why Bill Mott, with the potential horse of the year, we'll hit on that a little bit later, gets attention. But I could have, my top 3, I probably could have juggled them up and felt just as confident. But again, you look at the numbers, number of wins, number of stakes wins, money earned and whatnot. I just slightly lean towards Chad Brown over Brad Cox and Todd Pletcher.
I went Chad, Fletcher and Bob Baffert.
Could
And
have done that too. Yeah.
I put grade 1 wins as a high priority, and Baffert with those 2 wins, that December 28th card out in California, he wound up tying the other 2 guys with 10 each grade 1 wins. Baffert wound up with 33 graded stakes wins to 28 for Chad and 19 for Todd. The reason I picked Chad on top, and I could make a case for Baffert on top, was because, nothing against California racing, but Baffert's 10 grade 1 winners, only one of them came outside of the state of California, and that was Hope Road in the Ballerina, whereas Chad, I know the Breeders' Cup was in California, so you have no choice if you're going to run in it to run it, across country. So I don't give Chad credit for running horses in the Breeders' Cup because he has those kinds of horses, and if you want to run in it, you got to go out there. But he did win 2 at Del Mar after the fact, Salamis and Sagesta, where he chose to go cross country. So kind of based on that, I lean more toward Chad than Baffert. I get the Bill Mott thing because, you mentioned Kenny McPeak with Torpedo Anna. The job that Bill Mott did just with Sovereignty this year is one for the textbook.
Yeah.
The way he managed the campaign, the way he managed the horse on a day-to-day and hour-to-hour basis, the way he made the very difficult, maybe for everybody else in the world, but not for him, to scratch the horse a couple days before the Breeders' Cup Classic with a fever. He's the kind of person that can remove the context and the circumstances of, am I heading into the Breeders' Cup or am I heading into a grade 3 Derby prep in February where maybe it's not as important and it's an easier decision. But for him, I think those decisions are equally easy, whether it's the Breeders' Cup Classic or like a Derby prep in February, because that's just how he manages horses in his stable. It's, if there's a problem, end of story. Yeah, maybe if we're lucky, this thing will go away in time for us to run in the Classic, but he's not going to roll the dice under any circumstances and not going to wait until the last minute and always do what's the best thing for the horse. So I think that's, for him being a finalist, is kind of more symbolic of what a great horseman he is than anything that he actually accomplished over the course of the season with his whole stable. So I understand why he's in there. But again, I just thought Baffert's body of work, he deserved to be in there. And Pletcher, of course, he had fierceness and mind frame, and Tommy Joe and Ted Noffey, Antiquarian, win the Jockey Club Gold Cup, although under very bizarre circumstances. So that's so I went Chad and Pletcher and Baffert, but I understand why Mott is on there just based on, how he handled Sovereignty, who, a lot of people believe is going to be the horse of the year.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It was a phenomenal campaign, certainly. And as I say, a lot of times you put these names on the ballot underneath so they get honored at the end of the year, and I have no argument.
Right.
Bill Mott doing a great job with Sovereignty deserves to be sitting in the room on Eclipse Night. All right, let's go to what will be one of the more interesting categories. Jockey. I made a couple of slates for a show earlier this week, Irad versus Flavian. And you can see there the money won. And it was, about a month ago or so that the news came out, Irad Ortiz broke $40 million in earnings and still a few weeks left. But he was the first jockey to do that. And subsequently, Flavian Prat did it as well. And it came down to the last day with Flavian, getting a number of victories. They both go over $40 million. Flavian Prat winds up, I think it was $1,600. You can look at the numbers there, $1,600 dollars short of Irad after the year, but they both broke the 40 million mark. Now you look at the number of winners and the number of races. I mean, Flavian had almost 400 less starts, so that was impressive there. But then I also had a slate with their graded stakes wins, and you can see the breakdown there and what Flavian did as far as graded stakes wins. And because of that, I tilted in his direction. The finalists for jockeys, Irad Ortiz, Flavian Prat, and John Velasquez. And my ballot, Flavian Prat on top, Irad Ortiz second. And I put John Velasquez third because, as I mentioned earlier, I fill out that ballot in the second and third spots sometimes wanting to honor people. And I thought Johnny Velasquez just had such a phenomenal year. I'm happy he will be in the room when they open the ballot and be able to be recognized for a great year. But I tilted towards Flavien Prat, and again, I'm going to be interested to see how it breaks out when they open the ballot.
I thought Johnny V deserved to be on there, even if it wasn't like a great story, this 50-plus jockey winning all these big stuff. I mean, he won 10 Grade 1 wins, 24 graded stakes. He was on Sheffield's Pretty, a potential champion, Darth Vader, Fierceness, Ted Noffey, Tommy Joe. I mean, he's just had this insane, great season. I don't care how old he is. But I understand your point there. This was a category I mentioned at the top of the show. I think that I was dreading this moment because this morning when I was looking through my stuff and making notes and stuff, I was like, how did you not vote for Flavien Prat? I went Irad, Flavien, and then John V. And like, I hope I don't get my ballot revoked for admitting this, but man, I think I kind of screwed up here. I mean, it speaks to your point about how close it is, or how close it might be perceived. But, I don't really put the earnings, a lot of stock into that just because, it's largely dependent on which races you're running in. And granted, there's a correlation between the prestige and the grade of the race with the purse and everything. But, like with Kentucky Downs now, you got these, grade 3 races that are worth $250,000. So I don't, or even allowance races. So I try to lean away from the earnings standpoint. It is fascinating the way it came down. The stats weren't updated in the book that they sent out. They were both at 39 mil and separated by only a couple 100,000. So for it to even get tighter after that I'm glad you looked that up because I did not realize that. I knew it was close.
Yeah, crazy.
So I'm kind of, it's an easy second guess, but again, I like to put a lot of weight on Grade 1 wins. Flavien had 13 to 9 for Irad. And I'm not one of these homers that puts like the, kicking butt at the Saratoga meet, as that much of a factor, which Irad did this year, to the point where he didn't have to run on the last day after he got hurt in that whole mind frame, Jockey Club Gold Cup thing. He basically had it wrapped up without having to ride on the final day of the meet. He had great moments on mind frame. Rhetorical is an interesting horse who didn't wind up in any, categories. Ben Tornado, He's So Spicy, White Abario at the beginning of the year. Irad had a lot of stuff, but again, this maybe speaks to like the process when you're, filling out this ballot that I went back and I basically looked at the ballot again and I was like, well, I don't know what I was thinking. I hate to admit it, but, so I had Irad, Flavien, and John V. And if I just hope from what it sounds like, you were just saying that you don't think Flavien's going to win in a landslide by any means. So if that's the case, I'll be happy. I don't want to see, when they put out the stats on how many first place votes everybody got, if there's like a 1 next to Irad, everybody's going to know it was me, and I'm going to feel bad about that.
No, I think there will be I think it's going to be fairly close because Irad had the money earnings, was on top as far as the victories between those two. And I'm just looking. Overall, he was the top jockey as far as wins. So he's going to definitely attract.
All right, I feel a little better about this. Thank you. Yeah. I will say though, I did look up the percentages, and Flavien was a couple percentage point win percentage a little better than Irad. So even though Irad had more wins, he had way more starts, so that his winning percentage was a couple points lower.
Yeah, like I say, he had almost 400 more starts. And again, I'm just sitting here looking at the stats right now. Irad had over 1,600 starts. John Velasquez 778, and Irad and Flavien on top for the money earned. John Velasquez was 5th, and as you say, 10 Grade 1s. So he a very deserved finalist.
And part of the thing with John V is because he's that old, he's picking his spots a lot more. He's not running in maiden claimers in the second race on Wednesday and things like. Nor should he be. But again, you still got to get when you're getting on him, you got to win, and he did. So really hats off to a tremendous season for John V.
Yeah, no question about it. And just quickly, we have to wrap up. But apprentice jockey, the the finalists in the apprentice category: Chris Elliott, Jedsid Hazelwood, and Pietro Moran. I had those three. I think everybody will have those three. But I put Pietro Moran on top, Jedsid Hazelwood second, and Chris Elliott third. I could have easily switched it up. Pietro Moran wound up, a season long. Woodbine pretty much goes most of the year, and he wound up second on the Woodbine jockey standings. But Jedsid Hazelwood was a guy who attracted my attention, fairly late in the year in the Mid-Atlantic region as being very, very good. And Chris Elliott plied his trade in New York and was very good. So I could make the case for all of them, but I went for Moran.
I think this is probably the first time I ever did this, but I did abstain from this category. Although if I did that, or if I did vote, I probably would have put Chris Elliott on top just because I'm wildly more familiar with him than the other people in this category, which maybe that was part of why I abstained, because, I might be bringing some bias to the table. Because again, my knowledge of him is just astronomically better than anybody else, in the apprentice colony. So I think that's kind of so I did abstain I believe it was the first time I've done that, but we'll see what happens next year.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was obviously Chris Elliott familiar because New York, but when we were up at Woodbine, we interviewed Pietro Moran, so he hit my radar then, and I was watching the end of the year. And again, the Mid-Atlantic region, I picked up on Hazelwood, the last quarter of the year at least, and was kind of following him. So I did have a little bit to base it on, but I thought they all had great seasons, and they all are deserved finalists. So,
see, it pays for Capital OTB to send you guys on the road.
That's right. Yeah, it could be an omen. I'm all for that. Mike, appreciate the visit.
Are we going to do Horse of the Year?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought it up. Horse of the Year. Horse of the Year, to me, another interesting category, because it's one of those that I think, to me, is going to go towards Sovereignty. But again, I'm going to be interested to hear your take, because you went for Forever Young, older male. With the one start, I couldn't pull the trigger. Sovereignty doesn't make the Breeders' Cup, but again, on the basis of the season and what played out in the Breeders' Cup, I went in that direction. I think most people will, but your thoughts on Horse of the Year?
I think so, too. I'm willing to give older dirt male to Forever Young. I am absolutely not willing to give him Horse of the Year. So I got Sovereignty just for his body of work, which everybody is well familiar with, and just the whole story of his season. I had journalism. I had a hard time for number 2 and 3. I put journalism in there. I thought he had a really great season, notwithstanding not being able to beat Sovereignty. I threw Ted Naffy sort of in a little bit of a favorite trick kind of thing in third spot. Although, again, when I was going through this morning and looking through everything, I probably should have thrown Nitrogen in there because I'm just such a big fan of the great season and the interesting season that he had, maybe in the third spot instead of the 2-year-old. So I went Sovereignty, journalism, and Ted Naffy, but I didn't feel real strong about journalism at all. It was just, I was looking for something, and I thought he had a terrific story, a terrific season, and maybe was born in the wrong year, the same year that Sovereignty was. And Ted Naffy, his body of work, I generally don't like to throw 2-year-olds into this category, but I had a hard time with the 2 and 3 spot, and in retrospect, I probably should have thrown Nitrogen in there.
Yeah, like you.
Not that she would ever win it, but just, you got to pick somebody for 2 and 3, and her season was just so outstanding.
I'm in the same boat, and I was looking for, winners in other categories, and so in the second and third, I had Bookham Dano and Ted Naffy. But yeah, underneath, and I could have easily done Nitrogen as a kind of a good call in that as well. But Sovereignty, again, looking at ballots online, looks like he will be likely for Horse of the Year. It gets announced in a couple of weeks.
I would be curious to see how many people vote for Forever Young for Horse of the Year, because, again, I think, I'll give him the one thing, but I can't give him the whole shooting match, especially if Sovereignty has just been, I asked Bill Mott, I think it was probably the day after the Travers, has this horse had a bad day all year? And he goes, well, he did finish second in the Florida Derby, But actually, I thought he ran great that
I
day.
did too. Yeah.
So the answer was no.
I came out of that race
until the Breeders' Cup, of course.
Yeah, I came up out of that race thinking he was set up perfectly coming out of that for the Kentucky Derby. So I agree. That was a good effort, although second. His Jim Dandy was not one of his top efforts, but he got it done.
No, but I think Junior Alvarado knew he could.
Yeah.
He just do what he needed to that day. Like they were living to fight the next one.
Yeah.
And when I asked a question about has he had a bad day all year, I meant anything like maintenance jog, sniffle one day. Because every time he would breathe, we'd talk to him afterwards and say, "Well, that was pretty much perfect." He never used that word, but you never got any sort of vibe that anything was amiss with the horse again until a couple of days before the Classic.
Yeah. Mike, got to wrap it up, but we appreciate the visit, the conversation on the Eclipse Awards. It's going to be fun to see them open the envelopes in a few of these categories in a couple of weeks.
Yep.
But again, appreciate the visit. We'll talk again.
Thanks a million, Seth.
Appreciate it. Mike MacAdams, again, Daily Gazette sports writer, but also covers horse racing throughout the Saratoga season, certainly in the rest of the year as well, but like me, an Eclipse voter, so I got some ideas on what our ballots look like. And again, we will know for sure in just a couple of weeks. All right, I'm going to wrap it up for Racing Across America for this morning. Do want to note the weekend, there's an early post time. If you like betting the West Coast, Santa Anita is noontime, their time, today and tomorrow. That's 3 o'clock our time. So if you bet Santa Anita, maybe a little bit of an early start today and tomorrow, keep that in mind. Also, let me remind you that today is a Fan Appreciation Day at Uncle Sam Lane's in Troy. Swing by and let us say thank you to you if you're a patron out there. Food, vouchers, contest, Fan Appreciation Day. Uncle Sam Lane's in Troy this afternoon. And this afternoon here at the Clubhouse Racebook, King of the Hill contest, $1,100 up for grabs. So come on down and take your shot at a big pot today. Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. All right, I'll be back in about an hour or so for OTB Live for Saturday afternoon, but we'll wrap it up this morning for Racing Across America. Thanks for tuning in. See you in a bit. We'd like to thank Gulfstream Park for their sponsorship of this program and some of the other programming and events here at Capital OTB.